Okay, wow. So many people. Welcome everybody tonight.
Hello,
Thank,
hello.
thank you for coming out to the Shabbat table. I'm with you here live from Great Neck, New York, and this is the Shabbat table. Welcome. Everyone can start posting in which cities you're from. I mean, I see some people I recognize from the breakout rooms. I know we have Detroit, we have St. Louis for sure because Brother Roberts is so excited about
Sorry, I had to type it first. I'm sorry.
it.
No, I'm
Denver,
sorry.
Columbus,
Like that.
Detroit, St. Louis, Vegas, Chicago. Great, very good. So good to see everybody. Um, Houston, very good, very good. It's a nice
I see
crowd. It's a
Staten
beautiful crowd.
Island. Welcome, Staten Island.
Yes, welcome for the first time to Staten Island. Welcome. And, it's inspiring. The group itself is one of my highs, seeing this group together. It's really beautiful. The fact that so many people from so many places come together for inspiration every week. It's really wonderful. This week, we're going to spotlight a student from Denver. That's, I believe, Rabbi Danny Wolf's stomping grounds. And we're going to spotlight a bright young man named Brett Olson. Brett, are you here with us?
I'm here, yeah, thank you.
Okay, great. Take it away. Give us a few words.
All right, well, thanks for the introduction. So I'm gonna share what about this program that I've enjoyed and then an idea about this week's Parsha. So Shabbat for me has always been about having dinner with my family. So since I was a kid, no matter what, every Friday night I had to be home, have dinner with my family, and we've continued that tradition as we've all left the house and had homes of our own. And it's always been a time to tune out everything that's going on outside and focus on one another, focus on family, and reconnect with each other. So I've come to realize that Shabbat drives us to be more present and mindful. And being present is something that I'm working on from a personal goal as well. So I started a new job this week. And I'm working in a remote space. I'm on a new team. These are different times. And I find myself in these meetings where it feels like the group is talking a foreign language. And I've realized that there's value to that. By not getting distracted by every detail that everyone's talking about, it's actually allowed me to take a step back and observe other areas like how the conversation is flowing or other implicit cues. And I thought over this past week that this is what Shabbat is doing for us. It's providing us a different viewpoint. So the most enjoyable part of the program that I've enjoyed is finding new and practical ways to be more present and applying them during Shabbat, but also during the rest of the week. So since this program has started, I found myself being more focused when we light the candles and bring Shabbat in. I've found myself being more intentional about elevating the wine with Kiddush. But also, I found that these rituals have been more of a signal to myself on how to shift my focus and be more present, doing things like actively not multitasking. And so it's made me appreciate how Shabbat brings us back to center. And that's the concept that stuck out to me in this week's Parsha. So this week we read Parshat Bamidbar, the first book in Bamidbar, and we learn about a census that's taken in the nation of Israel 2 years after Exodus in the Sinai wilderness. And the Parsha tells us of the census and how we not only count everyone that's present, but we do so by each tribe. And then we learn about how each tribe made camp. So we read that there's 54,000 in this tribe, 45,000 in that tribe. Judah is camped to the east, Ephraim to the west, Reuben to the south, and so on. And then we read that the tent of the meeting or the ark is found in the middle of the camp. It's found among the camp. And it presents a concept that the tent of the meeting, the ark, acts as an anchor, and it keeps the tribes unified. So rather than having a bunch of fragmented tribes spread out, having the ark in the middle brings us together as a nation of Israel. And in the end, after we get all the values of how many people are in each tribe, we learn that there's about 603,000 total in the nation of Israel based off of that census. And so it's looking at it more of as a collective. And so this made me think that Shabbat acts like an anchor too. So we have many people from across the country gathered here today, all talking about the concept of Shabbat. So that in itself has unified this group of previously strangers to talk about Shabbat. But it's also Shabbat is not only an anchor for a larger group, but for ourselves. And we can use Shabbat to look inward and to find our own center. And so this Shabbat, I'll be focused on being more present and using it as an anchor for myself. So thank you, and I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom.
Okay, thank you so much, Brett. That was really beautiful. Definitely take Shabbat as the opportunity to anchor yourself, and also to take the Shabbat table as an opportunity to anchor with, right now, over 130 people. Tonight we'll be privileged to hear from Mrs. Adina Stilerman talk about a very special topic of Shabbat. Mrs. Stilerman is part of a team she started, helped found a team which brings Judaism to a lot of people in Florida. And tonight we have the privilege of hosting her to bring some more beautiful Judaism to more beautiful people all around the country. Mrs. Stilerman, are you here with us?
I'm here.
Okay, take it away.
Thank you so much. This is such an honor. Wow, to have so many people on the line. I want to be the first to wish everybody an early Shabbat Shalom. Candlelighting is actually a really interesting thing, because if I were to ask you to close your eyes, and in the first 3 seconds of you closing your eyes, tell me what's the first, if I told you to think of a Jewish item, what's the first thing that's going to pop into your head? So some of you might be thinking of matzah, because we're fresh out of Passover. Some of you might be thinking of a nagging mother-in-law. And Juliana just texted on the chat. She's like, candles, because she knows what my topic's all about. Candles are so iconic. They're so Jewish. Those Shabbat candles, like I remember we did a paint night with a few friends. Same here. Isaac said candles also popped into their head. And we said, think of something really Jewish to do, because you should have Jewish artwork. And it was amazing to see how many people chose to paint candles. Candles are so symbolic in terms of Jewish identity. But the dangers of dealing with something that you're so familiar with, that is so Jewish, that you grew up with maybe even since you were tiny, is that you might, they say familiarity breeds contempt. You might lose that awe that you have for that mitzvah. Like, I live in Florida, like all of you, or no, some of you actually, but here in Florida, I could pass by the most breathtakingly beautiful ocean scene, but I don't notice it because there's an ocean on every block and every corner, and I'm too busy thinking about the fact that I'm late for work. Does that resonate with you? Like, someone who works in a beautiful art gallery might not necessarily see the beauty of the artwork that they see every single day. And I love the fact that Britta also just agreed with me on the chat. So that familiarity is the enemy of the Jew. It's the enemy of Jewish inspiration. It's the enemy of true Jewish identity. And that's why it's so essential. These things that, like what we're doing right now on Zoom, learning is the food for the Jewish soul. And therefore, if we can maybe take something that's as familiar as candlelighting and shed a little bit of a different light, no pun intended, if we can shed a little bit of a different light on it, then it's possible that every time we do it, we would have a totally different relationship with it, like a romantic relationship, similar to how it works in general relationships. Like, you're so used to being married to someone for so long, it's on you as someone who's in the marriage to infuse within it a greater sense of awe for the marriage and the person that you're married to. So that's my goal. Now, I'm going to take you on a little bit of a journey that's kind of going to break that. And you'll say, Adina, where are you going to? If you go back in time a little bit, you'll realize that candles were very different. Just a hop and a skip and a jump away in history. Like, if you go to the supermarket today, so the candle aisle really has a lot to do with smells and colors, and maybe a teeny little section has to do with function, like those Shabbat candles. If you look in my home, we have candles that are there to set the mood if it's for a romantic dinner, and I have candles for smelly bathrooms, and then I have my Shabbat candles. But truth be told, like, before 1879, after 3,000 years of different of test runs, it was Thomas Edison who came up with this thing called light bulbs. But before then, people used candles to light up their home every night. And that's when I would venture to say, and I hope nobody on the line is going to be uncomfortable with this, but you know that feeling that you get when you come into Shabbos home on a Friday night and those candles are flickering and you just think, Shabbos. So, like, just a short while ago, there were candles lit every single night. Tuesday night, every home had candles. Wednesday night, every no home had candles. Thursday night, everybody had candles. Candles were a staple, like food and water and shelter. You needed something to light up your home at night. So what was so special about the Shabbos candles? And I will take it one step further. I mean, like, women were willing to sacrifice their lives and their freedom, men and women alike, hiding in closets in history, whether it was Russia or Spain, hiding closets to light those candles. And if we're told that the practical reason why we're even lighting candles in the first place is to create what we call shalom bayit, which is peace in the home, to make sure nobody trips over anything. But then Tuesday night also, we don't want people to trip over things. Wednesday night, this is what we like to call to break the lullaby effect, to make sure that we're not lullabied into Jewish practice and not assessing with a scalpel and different intellectual instruments to do open heart surgery and figure out what is the deeper reason why we do these things. So the question is, what are those Shabbos candles all about? If there was any night of the week that it was lit up with these beautiful romantic candles, why did women risk their lives to keep lighting them? And there's one thing that made those candles different in the Jewish home. And we're probably still today the only people in the world, I would say, who regularly light candles in this way. And do you know what that is? It's that we light candles during the day, because the commandment is that you don't light them on Friday night, which is the beginning of Shabbat. Every single Jewish day begins the night before, not at sunrise. You don't light it when the sun goes down. You light it before the sun goes down. So you're not necessarily lighting them for practical purposes on Friday night. You're lighting them for something far deeper. You're not allowed to light them once the sun has set. So just like anything in Judaism, there's a superficial view of looking at something, and there's a deeper view of looking at something. And both are always true. Almost like when it comes to our relationship with mathematics, right? You learn 2 + 2 = 4, and that is math, that's true. But really, you should graduate into higher types of mathematics. Algebraic equations, that's math, If there are math haters on the line, please pardon my analogy. But it's like me saying, where does an apple come from? So someone might say an apple comes from a tree, but someone who has a very low understanding of it will say apples come from a supermarket. And the truth be told, it's true, apples do come from supermarkets, but that's not the deepest level that you can connect to it. And I want to go even deeper into those candles. I want to figure out what was so unique about them that they wanted to sacrifice them. And why is it so significant that they lit them the day before? And this is where I'd like to go into something that is important to Jewish identity, which is called last impressions. I'm sure many of you have heard of first impressions. First impressions, there's a plethora of research that explores the impact that it makes anthropologically and socially, psychologically, what first impressions do for a person. Like, I'm meeting a few of you, I'm looking at your faces, I see Brett, I don't see many faces, sorry, but I see Brett and I see Rabbi Wolf is over there, and truth be told, I see Hannah Green. Hi, Hannah Green. So all of you are giving me a first impression, like someone out there, if I look past my first screen, I'll see someone snoozing on the couch. That's not the best of first impressions. But Nisaf, that's how you pronounce your name. She's leaning in. She wants to learn, right? So all these first impressions actually make an indelible impression on your relationship with a person, and it's really hard to shake those first impressions. But what's a last impression? Last impression is something really interesting. I would venture to say that last impressions is probably the theme of all Jewish history, and it's the reason why all of you are joined in today, and I'll explain it with a story. There was once a woman who lived in a little town called Krzanów, Poland. So Krzanów is just off of the highway if you're traveling from Krakow to Auschwitz. And in Krzanów, this woman's name was Leah. She was a young mother of 7 children, and her husband unfortunately passed away. Now, it was a pretty tragic way, the way he passed away, but still he passed away in honor. Why? Because when she was pregnant with her 7th child, before she found out that she was pregnant, her husband asked her permission to go over to what was then known as Palestine to build up the land. And she said, with pleasure, go. And he said, I'll send for you and be able to live in the holy land of Eretz Yisrael. And just a short while afterwards, she found out that she was expecting. And she didn't tell her husband. When she was at the train station, surrounded by her 6 little children, waving goodbye, she had tears flowing down her face. And her husband looked back, and I can imagine he assumed that it was because she would miss him. But he didn't realize it was far deeper than that. It was because she knew that she was carrying their unborn child, and she was so torn as to whether she did the right thing in not telling him, because she knew if she told him, he wouldn't go. And so she withheld the information. And they wrote letters back and forth to each other as he told her how beautiful this land is and what they were accomplishing and the communities that they were building, until one day she received a letter, and it was not a pleasant letter. It was news of the fact that her husband had caught malaria in the swamps and had passed away. A few months later, she gave birth to that 7th child, and his name was Eliyahu. And she raised him as a single mom. And as he got older, he started to notice that he was the only kid of his entire social circles in Krzanów, Poland in 1919 that didn't have a dad. There's no such thing as divorce, right? Like, you know, and he would cry to her, hey, Mom, why don't I have a dad? And it's going to be my bar mitzvah soon, and I have nobody to go to shul with. And where's my... And she would say, sweetheart, you are so lucky to have come from such a remarkable man that he gave up his life for the land of Israel. Not one of your friends can claim that they have a dad that gave up his life for Eretz Yisrael. Hold up your chin with pride, because you are better than them and you're stronger than them. And you are carrying the torch of Jewish honor. And she told him this message before the bar mitzvah, and she told him this message as the following story unfolded, the story within a story. When he got older, he said, Mom, I want to leave yeshiva because I want to support you and the family and help you. And she said, I don't want you to leave yeshiva because you have such a brilliant mind. Your mind is exploding with potential. It would be such a crime. Give it another year, just one more year, 2 years. And the next day, she handed him a sack of money. And he noticed that on her left hand, where her very humble but valuable wedding ring once rested, and it was his entire life that he saw that wedding ring was gone. And she handed him the money, and she said, go to Krakow and immerse yourself in Torah study completely for the next year. Then you can come back and work. And he knew where that money came from. And he remembers the touch of her fingers as she folded the sack of money into his hand and sent him on the way. Now, the end of the story is bittersweet because just a short while after that, maybe it was a few months or so, the war broke out, and he quickly hopped into a train to go back to make sure his mother was okay. But unfortunately, he was seized by officials, and he was sent into captivity and eventually going into concentration camps, went through 6 or 7 different concentration camps. And he kept telling himself, as he wanted to give up over and over again, hold your chin up high. You are a man of great honor, of great dignity, and you of resilience. My father gave up his life for the land of Israel. He dreamed of going back to Israel. That was in his mind. And I'll tell you something fascinating. You'll ask Adina, how do you know the story? He did survive the war, and he went through great. If you ask him his story, you'll say, why would you have survived? Someone who went through what you went through, I would have thrown myself against the barbed wires. So this story is not written up in any book. It's not in any article. I didn't hear it in a lecture. I heard it when I was sitting on my Zaydi's lap, because Eliyahu, that little child, was my Zaydi. And he told me that story when I was very little. And he would say, Adina, you come from such amazing genes. Do you know who he was talking about? Not his father. He said, my mother. Hold your chin up high. She's a woman of great honor. The sacrifice that she was willing to go through to put me into yeshiva and to make sure that I had tremendous Jewish pride, even though she was a single mom and the only one of her kind in the town. She gave me such pride, you have no idea. That woman made me who I am today. And that's the first time I heard that story. The second, third, fourth, fifth, I don't even know. At some point, I heard the story so many times, but he told me that story again when I was making a decision as to whether I should go to Israel for a little bit of time. When I got married, I wanted to spend my honeymoon, which was supposed to be 6 months, ended up being like 4.5 years, and now we're back. But I'll tell you something fascinating. My grandfather tells me the last time he ever touched his mother was when he folded in the money into his hand to send him off to learn. And that touch, he knew, went far deeper than the skin. It was soul to soul. It was a touch of sacrifice, knowing that her bare finger was what she was willing to go through, her sacrifice. And that's what I like to call last impressions. Last impressions it's every single one of you on the line, truth be told. If you know that you're Jewish today, statistically speaking, it's almost impossible. It doesn't make any sense. Your identity should have been squashed out of you long ago. It should have been squeezed and burned and excommunicated. Every single country you've ever lived in has kicked us out for being Jews or tortured. Why? Why are you still here learning? Like, why do you still show up? And why is Nisa leaning in, right? After this class, she'll tell me how she really pronounces her name. Why are we leaning into it? Someone at some point in time must have made a lasting impression on you. Someone was preparing you in previous generations. They could have made an impression on your parents or your grandparents, and like a torch passed this on from generation to generation, that there's something deeper and something more important, something so remarkable about what it means to be a Jew that it's worth you defying statistics and it's worth you taking the harder route. Now I'll tell you something interesting. When we say that we light the candles, not after it goes out, not after it becomes dark. We light the candles when it's still light, anticipating the darkness. That's what we do. We light those candles when we know it's going to get dark and we prepare for when we will need it most. And darkness and light is something that is such a beautiful analogy that it runs through all of Jewish sources. You'll see it pop up in every book. That darkness in history is when things are really hard as Jews. And light is like living in America in 2020. So easy, right? But not so in the late 1800s. Not so in other countries and other times. It was not so. To prepare for the darkness by lighting your candle today is really the key to Jewish identity and survival. And that's why it's so unique, and not to knock any of the guys on here, because truth be told, it is an equal obligation for men and women to light candles. Only when there is no woman in your life to light the candles for you, namely Jewish mama or Jewish wife, then you have to light the candles for yourself. In every home, there must be those Jewish candles lit before the dark comes. Because in the span of all of history, one must realize that we have that, what we call that moral wave, the high times and the low times. And if one can prepare today in this generation by lighting your soul ablaze, by knowing who you are and why you are a Jew, preparing it, you'll see in future generations when it will be dark, when it will be different, when we won't be able to take that Judaism for granted, when it won't be easy to be a Jew, you will make that last impression on your children, and know they will make a last impression on your grandchildren. I'll tell you a sobering thought. Very sobering thought is that, truth be told, I know her name only because when I prayed for my grandfather when he was sick, I know her name because his name was Eliyahu ben Leah. That's how we refer to people who are sick, by their mother's name. But I didn't know her name before he was sick. That's my great-grandmother. So my name is Adina. Is it possible that my great-grandchildren, if not them, but my great-great-grandchildren, won't even know my name, may not even know what I looked like, may not even know what my chicken soup tasted like, which is so Jewish, right? But what will they know about me? What is that lasting impression, what I was willing to sacrifice for? The seeds that I was planting now for when they are going to be in this world. that will be that deep impression that's on their soul. And even when they won't know me in terms of what I look like, they will know me from a soul level. They'll know who I am. That's the lasting impression. The candle lighting is such an amazing opportunity that when we cover our eyes and then we open them again, we want to see a different world than we saw before. We want to see a different light in terms of who we are and prepare before the darkness comes. And that's why it's so amazing. If you think about it, like just challenge Shabbat for just a minute. Challenge Shabbat. Like we have things that we remember in Jewish history by a holiday. Like we ended up being brought out of Egypt. So what do? We celebrate Pesach once a year. And then we were in tents. We celebrate Sukkot once a year. Everything that we know that we went through, if we want to celebrate something that happened, once a year is quite enough. But Shabbat, we're obsessed. We celebrate the creation of the world, not once a year. I would be at once a month, once a week. That's obsessive compulsive disorder, in my opinion. We celebrate Shabbat once a week, but it's not once a week. Do you know why? Because a week isn't even supposed to exist. If you look at how we even might have set up the calendar, there are great indicators in nature around us that kind of gave clues to humanity as to how we should look at a month, because there's the cycle that a moon goes through, let's say, that waxes and wanes, and therefore we would say in 2 moons, I would like to meet you in the desert. Right? And the annual cycle as well is it's pretty much obvious if you just have to observe the world around you that there's this sun cycle, right? And the day is even more obvious that the sun goes up and the sun goes down. Where, pray tell, did we get this 7-day week? And truth be told, that 7-day week is really something that was born out of thin air. This word, the number 7, is so crucial because it's the number of creation as we know it, of everything in this world. It's the creation of you, ladies and gentlemen, on the line. You have an opportunity to recreate yourself every single week, every 7 days, which is so fundamental to Judaism, is that like there's no finality to growth. There are no mistakes that can't be fixed. That you can continue to recreate yourself. And how do we commemorate that? How do we open it up? By opening our eyes. The first step of recreating yourself is to just change your perspective. Realize there's a bigger picture. Realize you're such an important part of Jewish history, but you're a blip, just a fleeting thing. You have such a tiny little life in that big span of all of history. Make it count every single day, every single week. Make it count, and make those lasting impressions. Be present. Make those lasting impressions. So I have a challenge for all of you. My challenge for all of you is to think, and if you don't know this on the top of your head, then maybe do a little bit of research, because that's what I had to do. Do a little bit of research. Find maybe a story in your family where someone made an impression on your parents or your grandparents that made you who you are today, that made you be interested in your Jewish identity. Find out that story and keep it in your pocket forever. And my call to action for you, my question for you that I would love for you to discuss now is, what will be your sacrifice that you want to incorporate in your life? Because let us not be mistaken that the deepest impressions, the impressions that actually last well past your lifespan and your memory, it only has to come with sacrifice. That makes the deepest impressions on future generations. What sacrifice do you want to incorporate in your life that you want one day someone in the future to talk about you? This is what she was willing to do in order to rise to the occasion of her Jewish legacy, to embrace it and say, I'm going to live on forever through this action. What speaks to you, both body and soul? What tells you this is my thing? This will be the torch that I will light, that will set the future generation in my personal family and the future Jewish people ablaze. And just like a candle will share the fire with another candle, and never lose any vitality in its own flame. That is how tradition works. Sharing a candle to the next generation. What is that sacrifice? And I'll tell you something really interesting. That's why I keep using that word, sacrifice. Because everything that's important in our life comes with sacrifice, and everything that's not important, we give it up quite quickly. Like our education comes with real sacrifice, relationships, marriage, children, everything that's important comes with amazing sacrifice. And it's hard, but at the same time, we know that is those relationships that feed us, and that's why we're willing to go through it. And that's why I want you, when you think of the things that you want to incorporate into your life, I want you to think, if it's hard, don't shy away from it. Embrace it and say, I know that this will be my torch. So ladies and gentlemen, in Olami world, keep lighting up the world, because that essentially is our high calling. And Shabbat Shalom.
Wow. Thank you so much, Mrs. Stilerman. I think I speak for everyone that we're never going to look at those candles the same way again. I'm going to quickly just mention to everyone, remind everyone about the Facebook group that we're going to drop a link to in the chat, the Zoom chat. The Facebook group is called the Shabbat Table Young Professionals. All young professionals on the meeting can join the Facebook group. It's a great resource. And now we're going to go into the breakout rooms. As you can see on your screens, the breakout rooms, the way it works is we're going to all separate into small rooms. Anyone who's been here before knows this, 5 to 10 people a room with a rabbi mediating, and we're going to get a chance to think about this question that Mrs. Stilerman just posed and discuss it amongst ourselves. What are we going to do? What's going to be our sacrifice? So without further ado, we will head to the breakout rooms.